best-selling personal finance book in history.
Yep.
Like, a man who literally taught millions of people how to build lasting wealth, actually had his own company file for bankruptcy just to avoid paying a $24 million debt.
I mean, it sounds like a contradiction that just breaks the
Yeah.
fundamental laws of financial physics.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't take architectural advice from someone whose own house collapses. But in the world of personal finance, the line between a brilliant wealth-building blueprint and an absolute fairy tale is, well, it's shockingly thin.
It really is. So welcome everyone to this custom deep dive. Whether you are, prepping for a meeting, trying to get your own personal finances in order, or you're just insanely curious about how the world works, we are really thrilled you're here.
Absolutely.
Today we are looking at a total cultural juggernaut. We're talking about Robert Kiyosaki's 1997 purple book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, and it is honestly hard to overstate the sheer impact of this book. I mean, we are talking about over 32 million copies sold.
Wow.
Yeah, across 109 countries.
Yeah.
And it's been endorsed by billionaire investors like Damon John, who calls it a cornerstone of his library. Will Smith endorsed it. Millions of people just hail this as the undisputed guide to wealth.
And this is where it gets interesting, when you ask traditional economists or traditional financial experts, the consensus completely flips.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
Right. Real estate investors and financial writers, like John T. Reed, they've called it literally one of the dumbest financial advice books ever written.
Yeah, they say it's filled with dangerous guidance.
Exactly. So our mission today is to sift through this massive stack of sources you've given us. We've got financial reviews, legal bankruptcy records, YouTube critical analyses, and, the book's own summary.
We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We do. We are going to separate the genuinely high-value mindset shifts from the potentially ruinous financial mechanics.
Which is so important. And I think let's start with the philosophy that made those 32 million people buy the book in the first place. Right?
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Because you don't reach that level of cultural saturation without tapping into something deeply resonant. And the core engine of the book is this incredibly powerful concept called the rat race.
Okay, I hear that term thrown around literally all the time. But how does the book actually define the mechanics of the rat race?
So Kiyosaki defines it as the endless, exhausting cycle of earning and spending that basically traps most of the middle class.
Mm-hmm.
And he points out that this cycle is driven by two very human emotions, fear and greed.
Fear and greed.
Right. So the fear of not having enough money or the fear of getting fired, that wakes you up and sends you to work, right?
Sure.
You get your paycheck, and then greed, or honestly just a natural human desire for comfort, kicks in. You start thinking about all the things you can buy.
So you spend the paycheck, the fear returns, and you just go back to work.
Exactly. And here's the mechanical trap. When you get a raise, you immediately increase your spending to match it.
Oh, lifestyle creep.
Exactly. Your income goes up, but your expenses go up right in tandem. So you are running on a treadmill, burning all this energy, but you're never actually moving forward financially.
And to illustrate how to break out of this treadmill, the book uses this narrative framing of the two dads, which, looking through our sources, this really seems to be the emotional hook that pulls readers in.
It is brilliantly framed. I mean, you have the poor dad, who is presented as Kiyosaki's biological father.
Right.
And he's highly educated, holds a stable government job as a superintendent of education, but he constantly struggles to pay the bills. And his default phrase, whenever he's looking at something he wants, is, "I can't afford it."
Which Kiyosaki argues basically shuts down the brain, right? Like, it's a statement of complete defeat.
Yes. And then, on the flip side, you have the rich dad, who is his best friend, Mike's father. This guy is an 8th grade dropout, an entrepreneur who owns multiple businesses. And his default phrase is actually a question. He asks, "How can I afford it?"
That linguistic flip is just fascinating.
It really is.
Because it forces the brain to actually go to work looking for solutions rather than just shutting down.
Precisely. The poor dad says, study hard so you can find a good company to work for. But the rich dad says, study hard so you can find a good company to buy.
Right.
And the entire foundation of the rich dad's philosophy really comes down to a very strict, unconventional definition of assets versus liabilities.
Okay, let's drill into that, because traditional accounting, tells us that our house or our car are our assets.
Yeah, but Kiyosaki kind of strips away all the complex jargon of traditional accounting and makes it binary. He bases it purely on cash flow.
Okay.
So an asset is something that puts money into your pocket, regardless of whether you physically work or not.
Like passive income?
Exactly. Think of rental income from a tenant, stock dividends, or royalties from intellectual property.
Mm.
Whereas a liability is just something that takes money out of your pocket.
Let me try an analogy here just to make sure I'm getting this.
Go for it.
Imagine your bank account is a container of water. Most of us are taught that our house is our biggest asset. But under this cash flow definition, because you have to pay a mortgage every single month,
No.
plus property taxes, plus maintenance when the roof inevitably leaks, well, your house is actually a leaky bucket.
Yeah.
It is constantly draining the water out. But an asset, on the other hand, is like a rain barrel. It is actively collecting new water and pouring it into your container while you sleep.
That's a perfect analogy.
It
And
does.
the friction that analogy creates is exactly why the book is so sticky. I mean, it makes people incredibly uncomfortable to hear that their beloved home is a liability.
Oh, for sure. People hate hearing that.
Yeah. But it forces you to stop measuring your financial success by your job title or your salary or, the car in your driveway, which literally loses 25% of its value the second you drive it off the lot.
Right. You have to look at your actual cash flow. Like, are you buying rain barrels or are you just buying more leaky buckets?
Exactly. And to buy the rain barrels, Kiyosaki says you have to focus on your financial IQ. Because our schools teach us how to be employees.
Mm.
They teach scholastic and professional skills, but literally zero financial skills.
None at all.
Right. So he defines financial IQ as a synergy of four things: accounting, investing, understanding markets, and the law.
So understanding how to read the numbers, knowing how money makes money, seeing supply and demand, and knowing how to legally protect your wealth.
Right.
Basically, you learn to make money work for you instead of you working for money.
And it is a phenomenal wake-up call for anyone who's trapped in that 9-to-5 grind and has never, questioned the standard American dream of a safe job and a 30-year mortgage.
But, and this is a big but, as we dig deeper into our stack of sources, a massive crack appears in the foundation of this whole story.
That does.
If this 8th grade dropout rich dad was such a genius who owned all this Waikiki real estate, who actually is he?
Well, this is where it gets crazy. For years, journalists and researchers basically scoured Hawaiian real estate and business records, trying to find this secret billionaire mentor.
Yeah.
They couldn't find a single trace of him. And Kiyosaki gave conflicting answers over the years. Like, sometimes he said a rich dad had passed away. Sometimes he said the family just wanted privacy.
Ah, okay.
But finally, in a 2003 interview with Smart Money magazine, Kiyosaki admitted that Rich Dad was a fabricated composite character.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He literally asked the interviewer, "Is Harry Potter real? Why don't you let Rich Dad be a myth, like Harry Potter?"
Okay, I have to push back a little bit here, though.
Sure.
Does it actually matter if it's a fable? I mean, we learn from parables all the time. The tortoises and the hare aren't real, but they teach us about pacing and hubris.
That's true.
If the mindset shift works, if the concept of buying assets instead of liabilities gets you out of consumer debt, who cares if Rich Dad is essentially Harry Potter?
Okay, fair point. Fables are wonderful for teaching morals, but fables become really problematic when they are marketed as nonfiction to sell literal financial blueprints to people who are struggling.
Ah.
This book was sold in the nonfiction section, and Kiyosaki repeatedly stated in the text, "This is a true story about my two dads."
Okay, so the marketing was definitely deceptive, but does that invalidate the advice itself?
Well, this leads into the primary critique from personal finance experts, like Ramit Sethi. We actually have Sethi's analysis in our sources.
Yes. Sethi is known for his highly practical step-by-step wealth program.
Exactly. And he points out that because Rich Dad, Poor Dad is built on a fable, it contains zero actionable mechanics. There is literally no budget. There is no step-by-step investment plan. There's no strategy on how to actually value a stock or how to underwrite a real estate deal.
So you finish the book feeling this incredible rush of motivation, but you are left entirely empty-handed on the how-to.
Yep.
It's all theory, like buy assets. Okay, how do I value them, find opportunities? Great, where do I actually look?
And from a business perspective, that omission is the entire point. Critics point out that the book functions as a brilliantly engineered top-of-funnel marketing tool.
Oh, I see.
It fires you up, breaks down your old beliefs, leaves you hungry for the actual mechanics, and then it naturally funnels you into Kiyosaki's incredibly expensive weekend real estate seminars and coaching programs.
So the book is just the hooks. The seminars are where they actually reel you in for thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
But what happens when the book does occasionally drop a specific piece of mechanical advice? Because there are a few in there.
Yeah, and that is where traditional economists start waving massive red flags. We enter what you could call the danger zone of financial advice.
Okay, let's get into it.
The book promotes heavy hostility toward traditional employment, and it heavily relies on using borrowed money, what he calls good debt.
How does the book differentiate good debt from bad debt?
So bad debt is borrowing money to buy a leaky bucket like financing a sports car or putting a vacation on a credit card.
Makes sense.
Good debt, according to the book, is borrowing massive amounts of money to buy an asset, like an apartment building, with the assumption that the rental income will cover the mortgage and leave you with a profit.
Mm-hmm.
So Kiyosaki advocates for using massive leverage to buy real estate with little to no money down.
Okay, and to understand the mechanics of why that's dangerous, let's contrast it with someone else in the personal finance space, like take Dave Ramsey.
Right. Complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Exactly. Ramsey's model is built on extreme safety. He demands zero debt. He wants you to have a fully paid off mortgage before you even think about aggressive investing.
Yep.
If Ramsey wants you to drive a Volvo at 30 miles an hour, safe, but boring, Kiyosaki is telling you to strap a rocket booster to a skateboard.
And the rocket booster is the leverage.
Right. If the road is perfectly straight and property values only go up and your tenants always pay on time, you win the race. But the danger of leverage is that it multiplies your risk. If you have a massive mortgage, your monthly cost is fixed. So if there's a single pebble on the road, like say a pandemic, where tenants legally don't have to pay rent for a year, you absolutely explode.
Exactly. The bank still wants their mortgage payment, but your cash flow has vanished.
And it's not just real estate, right?
No. Beyond real estate leverage, he hypes up getting 16% returns on complex tax lands, and he casually tosses out the idea of buying penny stocks and IPOs to make a killing.
Let's define some of those mechanics for a beginner because it honestly sounds terrifying. What actually is a tax lien?
So, when a homeowner fails to pay their property taxes, the local government will issue a tax lien against the property. And investors can actually buy that debt from the municipality.
Okay.
So the homeowner now owes the investor, often at astronomical interest rates like 16%. And if the homeowner doesn't pay, the investor can theoretically foreclose and take the house for pennies on the dollar.
I mean, that sounds like a legal nightmare, not a passive rain barrel.
It is incredibly complex.
Mhm.
You are dealing with municipal laws, bankruptcy codes, and properties that are often heavily distressed. Pitching that to a novice as a reliable way to build wealth is just reckless.
And the penny stocks?
Same thing. The same goes for penny stocks.
Yeah.
They're shares of tiny companies trading for under $5. They are highly volatile, easily manipulated, and most retail investors lose their shirts.
Speaking of reckless, I saw an anecdote in our sources about his approach to contracts that just blew my mind.
Oh, the cat.
Yes. In the book, Kiyosaki explains how he gets out of real estate contracts that don't look right to him after he's already signed them. He says he uses a contingency clause that states the contract is subject to approval of my partner.
Right.
But he openly admits that his partner is secretly his pet cat.
Yeah, and legal experts point out that this is operating in bad faith and honestly borderline fraud.
I would think so.
The mechanics of contract law require mutual assent and good faith. If the seller calls your bluff and takes you to court to force the sale, a judge is going to order you to produce this partner. Revealing a tatty cat is not a legal defense.
It's just wild.
It is incredibly dangerous legal advice for a layperson to follow in the real world.
And the sources also highlight his endorsement of MLMs, which feels completely out of left field for a real estate guy.
Yeah, Ramit Sethi highlights this as a massive ethical red flag. Kiyosaki casually recommends joining multi-level marketing companies as a good place to learn how to sell.
How does an MLM actually function mechanically, and why is that bad advice?
Well, in a traditional sales job, you are paid a salary or commission to sell a product to an actual customer. In an MLM, the mechanics are completely different. The participants are the primary customers.
Oh, because they have to buy the product.
Exactly. You are required to buy large amounts of inventory yourself, and your main goal isn't necessarily selling that product to the public. It's recruiting your friends and family to join your downline. You make a cut of whatever inventory your recruits are forced to buy.
Which is why the Federal Trade Commission reports that over 99% of people who join MLMs lose money.
99%.
Recommending an MLM to learn sales is like telling someone to intentionally crash a car so they can learn how to drive. You are throwing people into a mathematically rigged system.
It really is. And this brings up a crucial metric for evaluating literally any financial guru. Do they practice what they preach, and how their own specific strategies hold up to reality?
Right. Kiyosaki teaches massive leverage, aggressive tax strategies, and the power of corporate structures. So let's look at his own track record.
And the story takes a very sharp turn into the public record in 2012. One of Kiyosaki's companies, Rich Global LLC, actually filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
Yeah, and our sources show this wasn't just a quiet corporate restructuring. This bankruptcy was the direct result of a massive lawsuit.
That's right.
The Learning Annex, which is the educational company that backed Kiyosaki early on, they put him on Oprah, put him on stage at Madison Square Garden. They sued him.
Yeah.
They claimed he never paid them their contracted share of the profits from all the massive speaking engagements they set up.
And a judge agreed with the Learning Annex.
Huh.
They audited the numbers and awarded the Learning Annex a judgment of nearly $24 million.
Wait, but Forbes estimated Kiyosaki's personal wealth at the time to be around $80 million.
Right.
If he has $80 million, how does a $24 million judgment force him into bankruptcy?
Okay, this is where we see the actual mechanics of the corporate veil in action. In the book, Kiyosaki teaches the power of corporations. An LLC, or limited liability company, acts as a sort of legal quarantine zone.
Okay.
If you set up an LLC, the law treats that company as a completely separate person from you.
So the company, Rich Global LLC, is the entity that signed the contract with the Learning Annex, not Robert Kiyosaki, the human being.
Exactly. And Rich Global LLC only had about $1.8 million in assets.
Oh, wow.
So when the $24 million judgment came down, the LLC didn't have the money to pay it. So the LLC declares Chapter 7 bankruptcy, meaning it gets liquidated and shut down.
Right.
And because of that corporate veil, the liability stops at the company's borders. The courts cannot reach into Kiyosaki's personal bank accounts to satisfy the debt.
So by bankrupting the LLC, he legally shielded his $80 million personal fortune and his dozens of other companies from that judgment.
Yeah.
The Learning Annex, the partner who literally helped build his empire, was left holding an empty bag while his personal wealth remained totally untouched.
And look, it is a completely legal maneuver, but it leaves a lot of critics questioning the reality of his teachings. When your guru preaches using other people's money and leveraging corporate shields, you really have to realize that sometimes you might be the other person whose money is being leveraged.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought. And if we bring the timeline up to the present day, our sources point out a bizarre evolution in how he markets his brand now.
They do. Critics note that his messaging has basically shifted away from optimistic financial education toward, well, apocalyptic fear-mongering. He is currently predicting a massive systemic economic collapse and a historic wealth transfer.
Yeah, he's telling his massive audience to abandon traditional financial systems, pushing alternative assets like precious metals, and essentially prepping for doomsday.
And it is a far cry from teaching a 9-year-old the difference between an asset and a liability, right?
Totally.
Critics argue this pivot is really just about the mechanics of marketing. Fear sells books, it sells expensive seminars, and it sells survivalist assets.
Because when the stock market goes up, a steady index fund is appealing. But if you can convince people the entire system is about to collapse, they become desperate for a secret escape hatch.
Exactly. It's a very different pitch.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We are looking at a book that has genuinely helped millions of people rethink their lives, written by an author whose specific advice is mathematically reckless and whose business practices have left partners completely unpaid.
It's a lot to process.
How do you process this?
Well, I think you have to separate the philosophy from the mechanic. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a phenomenal tool for shaking you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
The concepts of paying yourself first, prioritizing financial literacy over just getting a better job title, recognizing that a house is an expense, and striving to stop trading your hours for a paycheck, those are incredibly valuable paradigm shifts.
It gets you out of the rat race mindset. It forces you to look at your actual cash flow and figure out how to build rain barrels instead of just buying leaky buckets.
But, and this is the critical takeaway, it is a terrible and potentially ruinous blueprint for managing your actual portfolio.
So take the mindset shift. Let the fable wake you up. But leave the rocket-boosted leverage, the pet cat contract loopholes, the multi-level marketing schemes, and the apocalyptic panic completely behind.
Right. Leave all of them.
When it comes time to actually invest your hard-earned money, put down the fable and look for practical, transparent mechanics.
And that leads to a final thought I think we all need to mull over. If you look at genuinely effective wealth building, things like buying low-cost index funds, paying off high-interest debt, consistently budgeting over decades, the mechanics are proven to work.
Yes,
but they are horribly, painfully boring.
Nobody is making a blockbuster movie about a guy who aggressively funded his 401k for 35
Yeah,
years.
exactly. As humans, we crave a secret shortcut. We want an exciting story about an eighth-grade dropout who outsmarted the system, or a brilliant loophole that bypasses the hard work.
So the question we have to ask ourselves is, does our human need for a compelling narrative make us inherently vulnerable to financial gurus?
That's the real question. A blueprint that only works in a fairy tale won't keep the rain out when the storm actually hits.
The next time you are offered a financial hack or a secret to wealth, ask yourself, are you buying a mathematically sound strategy or are you just buying a really good story?
Couldn't have said it better.
Beautifully put. Thank you for joining us on this custom deep dive. Keep questioning the consensus, look under the hood of those cash flow numbers, and we'll catch you next time.